Hello, it's Carl, U.S. radio guy. Today I'm going to talk to you about, I've had a lot of questions about how I create the animations that I put on my website or share on social media. So I'm going to try to walk you through one of my batch files that creates 36 hours of imagery from received GOES images. In this case, I'll be using GOES 16. And kind of try to explain the method to my madness. I receive GOES, like a lot of us do, using GOES tools on a Raspberry Pi. But then I use SyncThing to sync that imagery to my PC, where I do all my post-processing. So because I'm doing this on Windows, I use several pieces of software, and they're all command line running pieces of software. These include ImageMagick and FFmpeg. Some cases I'll use Sanchez depending on the application. I might use XPlanet. In this one I'm just going to be using ImageMagick, FFmpeg, and then a lot of scripting using Windows commands. Okay, turned on my excuse me, cursor highlighter so I can show you this a little bit. And what I'm going to try to do is I'll take this entire script and upload it to my website with a link in the comments here. So I'm just going to go through row by row, and this will not be exactly like you'll need to do it or even try to do it on your computer, because my file structure is quite a bit different. I use 6 different drives. I have redundant drives. I have backup drives. But I use 2 primarily for my GOES data. One drive is the one I capture the last 24 hours worth of data on. And then the second drive is my archived drive for GOES imagery and data for the last 6 months. Then I have a third drive that retains data. In this case, I think I have up to about 3 years worth of imagery on that last backup drive. So the first thing it does, and I'm just going to show you this here, this is just a little block I put in on every script that I write. That way, if I have an error, it's a go-to. So if I need to, if I have a mess up in this, I can move that test section down somewhere else and have it skip a section so I can analyze and debug where my errors are. Now this next section here, I call it my time block. This block I reuse multiple times. It's pretty much exactly written in every single script the same way as I have it here. And what it does is computes UTC time and date so that I can use it to tell the software where to look and what dates and what times to look for. It'll set the seconds, it'll set the days, it'll create a formula that'll say what is the day 2 days ago, what is the day 2 days before, what was yesterday, what's the month. Each piece of software, for instance, like GOES tool, uses year-month-day, but Sanchez uses year-month-day with a T, and then hour, minute, second. UTC time is pretty explanatory. Some of the software that I use, like XPlanet, that uses a different way of displaying the time. So this part sets the time, and this little section here just echoes or prints the time on the screen so I can get a quick look to go, okay, yeah, it's February 22nd, 2023, or in UTC time, 2023, 0223, or 22, and then with the time. Then this section here, now remember I have 2 different drives that I'm pulling data from, and I need to get 36 hours of data and imagery from those drives. So I'm using a for loop, which is a recursive loop that is a Windows command that'll go in and it'll go through this folder, which is in my case D, GOES Data Center, GOES 16, full disk, custom loop. That's where I store all my custom loot files, the ones with the enhanced color imagery. And it loops through this and it pulls from this created file up here what the start time is. It's a variable that it plugs in, and it looks for every single file in this folder that is in the start time area, which would be today, and then it moves a copy of it, because I want to keep my originals. I don't want to screw up my originals in my data center. It moves a copy of that image to temp processing GOES 16 web video. Then after it's done looking through all those files, it goes to the next one and looks for midday, which would be yesterday's files. So it's looking for 36 hours ago, 24 hours ago, recursively looping and moving it all into the GOES 16 web video. Next, it goes and looks for today's file time. So I have it automatically set, so anything from today's date, it loops through and moves that into the GOES 16 web video folder. Now remember, I said I had multiple folders, so my backup folders, not my backup folder, my current folder, which is housing the last 24 hours roughly of GOES imagery, it also needs to search that file, because even though I searched for it here in the GOES D drive, I automatically transfer this every 24 hours at 12:05 a.m. local time to my D drive. So there's always still files fresh on the F drive. So it's going to go recirculate that and recursively check all those and move any of those files into the GOES 16 web video. Now, if you're just loading all your data onto one drive, you don't have to go through these 4 different steps. You might only need the first 3, and it could be just your C drive satellite imagery folder. Now, here's where it gets a little more complicated, because the images are that come off GOES come in at 5,424 by 5,424 pixels. And some of my scripts that, if I'm going to create imagery, I might end up with an MP3 that could be 900 megabytes or 1.2 gigabytes. And that's a lot. And on the internet, you're really not going to see a lot of difference unless you had it in front of your computer where you could really zoom in. It's really not necessary, for me at least, to create an animation using full-size imagery. Plus, there's a lot of ways that I use, and this is what's in this next script, to optimize, reduce the file size, and also resize those images to 1,000 by 1,000 pixels. So I'm using Image Magic here. So I'm pulling the information from this folder right here where I uploaded, where I copied everything here. It's pulling automatically, and it's using a recursive loop again to go through every single image in the GOES 16 web video. It's going to run Image Magic. This is the version I'm using, 7.1.0 HDRI. And then it's going to do a command called Mogrify. So it's going to look at all the images as it's being recursively looped back and forth until they're all done. And when it's done with the commands, it's going to put them into temp processing GOES 16 web video auto resize. Now I do that on purpose. I set up additional folders so that if I have an error in the processing, I can go back and see where the error was. Did it actually do this command and put those images into the auto resize folder? So now I have a string of filters that I'm using with Image Magic, and these are ones I've talked to a lot of people, done some different things. I've went on to got some actually scripts from NOAA and to see how they run, because they use Image Magic for a lot of their files. Actually, a lot of these places do. And how they optimize and compress their images. This is the one that I've come up with. It's coming up, I've made a mistake. I said I did 1,000 by 1,000. Actually, I'm running, making these images 1,800 by 1,800. I'm unsharpening them a little bit. It doesn't really make a difference. You don't have to do this, but your file size is going to be significantly larger when the MP4 is created, because you haven't compressed or optimized that image. And if you look at them side by side on a monitor, you will not see the difference. So it runs through all these commands. I'm not going to go through them all. It does do a pretty good job, and it's fairly fast. On my PC, a 36-hour, and this is where most of the time takes, in the optimization, probably takes about 5 minutes on the PC to run through all the files, maybe a little bit more. And then this little last section here, what this does is, because I like to timestamp the name of the file and the time, so it goes in, and in the point size of 28, I'm using an orange color. My font is Ailerons, which is what I use for my website, and it annotates the time and the file name right onto that image at the bottom. Right here it says Gravity South. That's just ImageMagick speak for put it at the bottom of the picture, right in the middle. Then once all these files are processed and they're all moved into the auto resize folder, it goes to the next section, which in this case applies my US Radio Guy watermark to every single image. I have combined these commands so that it's just one command. Because I do multiple, I actually have about 30 scripts I use. I keep them separate because I have a different watermark that I apply, a transparent watermark. So again, this is going through every single image in the temp processing Go 16 web video auto resize folder. That's a JPEG. If you're doing PNGs, you're going to have to change that. And it's adding my watermark into it's called Gravity Northwest. So it's sticking that into the upper left-hand corner of the picture, 15 pixels down, 15 pixels over, so it doesn't get cut off. And there's the file that I'm using. Goes full disk white, 250 by 50 pixels PNG, and it's going to make all those and put them in yet another folder. The D temp processing Go 16 web video FD watermarked folder. Now here's where it gets a little tricky. In Linux and on Raspberry Pi, ImageMagick has the ability to create an MP4 without going through extra steps. However, on Windows, it doesn't have the same command. I used to create a GIF image out of all the images, which you may be familiar with, where you just take a stack of images and animate them into a GIF. That was pretty time consuming for me, and I lost a lot of quality on the imagery. So what I am doing in this part is I'm enabling what's called delayed expansion, and then I renumber all the images because they're already time stamped and dated. I don't have to worry about which one's dated what. They're all in order in this FD watermark folder. It goes through here, sets the index, sets the delim in case there's any blank spots in it, and then because I know the file name is what it's standard to Go's tools, I know the number count, what it should be. So it's looking for a series of numbers 0 to 9, which would also equate to what used to be the date, and it's going to renumber every one of those. It's going to do a loop so that every numbered file where it used to be, say, Go 16 custom loot 2023-0222, then T122900 Zulu. Now these are going to be changed to something simple like Go 16 001, Go 16 002, Go 16 003, and so on and so forth until it's done with all 36 images it finds. And what's nice about this is let's say I missed a couple images because, like right now, excuse me, we're having an ice storm, and it is having an effect on my dish. So let's say I didn't get the exact 36 hours. It doesn't matter to this file count. It'll total up the number of files in this FD watermarked folder rather than looking for the number of files that could be expected to be created in a 36-hour window. So some of my videos might be 36 hours, some might be 35 hours, 30 minutes, 35 hours period. So it just renumbers all those and then moves those files into yet another folder, temp video. Now this is where I create, now that they're numbered, FFmpeg does not need to, or it has the ability to go through and make a video from those numbered images rather than the time and date stamped images. So I'm changing the directory. I'm going into the GOES 16 web video temp video, and then I'm using an FFmpeg command, the software. I'm doing a frame rate of 4 on this one. Some of the projects I use, I have multiple frame rates. Like for a mezzo, I might use a frame rate of 4, 16, 24, 48, and run multiple lines of code to create each individual MP4 so that I can go back and look at them and go, okay, this mezzo only runs for 2 seconds and it doesn't show much, but this one runs for 32 seconds and it shows the development of, say, a hurricane. So in this case, I know I've pretty much looked at all these before, so I know frame rate of 4 for me is a good setting for the 36-hour imagery. Now it goes through, and these variables here is where it's looking for those numbers that are created here in the temp video folder. It's looking for those numbered JPEGs. Now it's going to filter those out, and I use something called interpolation. Some don't use that. It takes a fraction of a second each longer per image. But what this does is blends and does a bidirectional blend between two images. So if you have two images that are almost identical, if you don't use the interpolate, you actually can get some stuttering of how it looks like when the clouds move across the screen. They won't be smooth. This allows me to smooth that out at a frame rate of 25 frames per second. I've tried different frame rates. 25 for me seems to be pretty good. And then using the libraries, the formats, which are pretty standard. This puts out an MP4. It dumps that created MP4 into GOES 16 web video and yet another folder, final, GOES 36 hours.mp4. So that is the file that is created after all this other processing. Now, I've still got all those files stuck in all those other folders I created. I don't delete the folders because I reuse them for multiple scripts. So if you're writing your own script based on this, you have to create these folders exactly how the batch file is looking for them. If you don't have temp processing GOES 16 video with that hard space and you just put a regular space in, the computer doesn't know what that is and it will throw an error. So whatever your file structure is, make sure it's exact and put in correctly. I should point out, if I go back, you'll see, let's see, is it here? Some of the programs and how they're written. You'll see I have backslashes here for the file structures. Magic and FFmpeg are kind of weird in that if you run them differently like this, they only are looking for forward slashes. They're looking for the other version, like a Linux versus Windows forward slash backslash, and they're expecting that. So you could make variables for all these folders, but you have to remember that the forward or backslash might need to be different depending on the command. Okay, jumping back down. So now I've got all those file folders full of images that have been copied, transformed, and moved. I don't need them anymore. So I have 4 commands here that go through every one of those folders and automatically delete all those created files. I don't need them anymore. Just get rid of them and we're done. The original files are still on my GOES data center drives and my backup drives, the original. So if I want to run another script with them, doing something else, maybe doing a CONUS view of the US, I still have all those original files. Or if I want to go back and do a file, say for the last year, to show the equinoxes and how the shadow falls across the earth, I still have all that original data. And going a little bit further down, because I use these for other things besides to look at for myself, I take a copy of that file that's created here, this final GOES 36 hours, and I'm using a for loop because I do have other MP4s in some of these folders. You wouldn't have to. You could use xcopy or just a copy command. but I'm using a for loop to make sure I get it, and I haven't missed anything. And I am moving that final video, anything in there with have a asterisk, so that's my wild card. It's looking for any MP4, and I'm moving that to yet another drive where I keep backups of these Ghost 36-hour imagery. And those sit there until I need them or delete them later, or the script runs every 24 hours, so that next movie that's created, this Ghost 36 hours, when it goes here, it'll automatically replace what was there before. And then second, because I use Jamie's Goes Vitality software, and Jamie, if I'm pronouncing the name of your software wrong, I apologize. That's how I pronounce it. And Goes Vitality software is an open source software that allows you to, it's a web app that allows you to view your Goes imagery. I use this to create the animations that Goes Vitality allows you to display. So all I am doing is copying yet another copy of that MP4 and moving it to my XAMPP folder for Goes Vitality under htdocs videos. That way Goes Vitality knows where to find that video. Now lastly, I used to do this in the script, and it seems to be a known error in WinSCP, which is another open source software. This one allows you to move files either on your computer, or it's an excellent resource to move files to an FTP site like I use for US Radio Guy. So I've taken it out because for whatever reason I just kept getting errors on the scripts, and it has something to do from what the author of WinSCP tells me is because I am using so many resources to process the images. It hasn't been cleared out by the time WinSCP runs at the end of the script. So if you look right here, I have this handled by the Windows Task Scheduler. I use that on my computer a lot. So all these scripts are all automated. I don't go in and click a button. It runs whether I'm home, whether I'm on vacation, whether I'm sleeping. I have tasks set up, and I'll show you a few of these on another video, how to use Task Scheduler to run these programs automatically in the background. They don't even pop up on your screen normally. Sometimes I do want them to pop up because I want them to see if they're running. I have a lot of them run at around 1 in the afternoon. That just seems to be a good time to upload stuff to my website. So this is the command for running WinSCP. You can look at it. I've taken out my passwords, obviously. But what this does is take that Goes 36 hours from that final video. Oops, and I didn't change the name. That should be 36 hours right there. Let's make that 36. See, you learn something new as you go through your stuff. It moves that to my website server on FTP to a folder called Goes 16 data. Moves it there and then renames it. And these names aren't right. This should actually say 1636 hour, but this is an older script and I don't use this section, so I'll probably just pull it out. And then at that time when I was running it, these are commented out so they won't work. It would go through and remove that final MP3.4 from the final folder so I didn't clog up and have extra space. And commenting, there's a couple different styles. You can use the remark command. You can use the double colons here. These are just lines that aren't executed by the program. So I hope that is as clear as mud. I will try to post this in its entirety. You can take a look at it. Some tips are you've got to make sure your folder structures are exact for Windows batch files. They need to be accurate, otherwise the software just won't know where to look. You'll get an error thrown saying can't find folder specified, especially in these commands where it's processing all these optimizations for imagery. And if you want, you can leave out some of these sections. You don't have to optimize the imagery. You don't have to put in a timestamp. You don't have to watermark them. But make sure the folder structure follows so that when it gets done with each line, this command puts it here. It's looking for it in that area. This command's looking for it in this area. This command is looking for it in let's see, this area. So it's like stacking them. They have to match each one as it goes through and through and through. And then I'm going to load up another one here. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Linux way of doing it on Raspberry or Ubuntu or something like that from one of the scripts that Jamie did for Vitality Goes. Okay, now I've got a script up similar to the one that I just showed you, except this one is one Jamie did for his Goes Vitality. So his is written in a Unix bash or scripting. So it's completely different to what you just saw. This is what you would install if you were using these ImageMagick FFmpeg on say Raspberry Pi, Ubuntu, or Linux type device. And the first thing it does, it's just going to go in and check to see if you have installed ImageMagick or if you have installed FFmpeg. And if you haven't, it gives you a warning because obviously you need that software installed before this will run. And then it's going to go out and it's going to look for all your, because Jamie did it a little bit differently. I kind of like the way he did it. He's got his scripts configured so that they go out and they call for an ini file to look for the folder directories that are specified. Again, this one, the way I do my stuff, this just wouldn't work for me. I'd have to rewrite this quite a bit. And he's going for 7 days, so this is a longer script. It's pulling more images. Got temporary, he's creating temporary folders for the ABI, so when those images get moved to be created into an MP4, your old ones, your original ones, don't get deleted or destroyed. So it goes through, picks the start time using the system dates, moves, creates that temporary directory. I don't create the directories on my scripts. I create them manually. I type them in because I use them over and over and over, and I don't delete the folders. I only delete the images that are within those folders. Then it's looking for the current image size. It echoes that out, and if it can't find them, it gives you an error. It says it's skipping that particular file. It's calculating the scale. He's resizing his to 1500. Remember on mine I did 1800. He has a little script here because if they're an odd width, like 1500 by 1501 pixels, that'll throw an error when they're compiled. So it's just looking through and he's scaling that image, looking for it, and preventing it from being an odd width so that it doesn't get an error thrown. And then it creates those. And then here it resizes and copies the files to a temporary working directory. Similar to what I did, it's going up and popping them into this folder up here. And then it starts going through and checking. He's using regex. I said I can't do that as easily on Windows. I found a different method to do that. So he's going through using that's the start time, the end times for both of the files, and then going down after it's done that, smogrified them. You could add in here that interpolation if you would. If you want to, that could make those images a little bit smoother. Takes a little bit more time, not too much though, and not too much on resource. I know on like Raspberry Pis, you got to be pretty careful with the resources you use. Once that's done, it then goes through here and generates the MP4. He's generating at a frame rate of 15, and I think what did I say I was doing at, for this one, I did a frame rate of 4, so quite a bit different. And then he's got his pattern glob. This is what I wish I could do on Windows. That's why I have all that recursive renumbering system. And I've used this. It works. It's really slick. It's pretty. All you do is put your folder names into the ini file and set it up and run it, and it generates it pretty well. But that's the way he does that on his. Okay, so that pretty much sums up the way that I do a 36-hour animation for imagery. You could give it a shot. Once you get those blocks done and figured out, you can reuse those blocks to create imagery like shown on the background here, which is yet another 36 hours of imagery, except tiled with all the different channels that goes, in this case, goes 16.1 puts out. A couple of tips is make sure you have ImageMagick loaded, FFmpeg loaded, and create temp files. Don't try to use your original files because they will be altered and changed. That way you have the original imagery to work with for, say, another project, or if you mess up and try it again. So create some temp folders. You don't have to rely on my file structure. It's the way I named it. I've got other things that are more streamlined. This is just the one I've been asked about the most, so I wanted to throw it out there. And I'll get this up on my website on a page, and I will link to it at the bottom of the YouTube channel here. As always, like and subscribe, and thanks for listening.